In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, June 2nd, here in South Korea. Findings for the month of May show the country's inflation accelerated at a slower pace for the fourth month in a row, posting 3.3%, its lowest level in 19 months, in light of lower global oil prices. Calls are mounting for a session of the United Nations Security Council to address North Korea's recently failed space launch, which US officials say made use of ballistic missile technology in flagrant violation of UN resolutions. Meanwhile, defense ministers are gathered in Singapore on this Friday to attend the opening of the annual Shangri-La dialogue amid tensions between Washington and Beijing, as well as Moscow's aggression in Ukraine. Price pressures on consumers are easing further here in the country. In fact, inflation noted its smallest gain in 19 months in May. Lee Key-cheol has our top story.
Inflation in South Korea continues to ease, falling to the lower 3% range in May. Data from Statistics Korea released on Friday shows that the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 3.3% on year. That's the lowest figure since October 2021. Inflation has been on a steady decline for 4 straight months after rising slightly in January. This slowing of inflation is largely due to the on-year drop in oil prices, mostly due to base effect from the sharp rise in prices during the first half of last year. Prices of petroleum products also plunged 18% compared to the previous year. That's the sharpest on-year drop in 3 years. Prices of agricultural, fisheries, and livestock products also dropped 0.3% on year. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy price changes, also slowed to 3.9% last month compared to the 4% recorded in April. The agency is forecasting that prices will continue to stabilize.
There are uncertainties regarding international commodity prices, oil prices, the global situation, and exchange rates. But if there are no special circumstances, prices are likely to remain stable for the time being.
However, electricity, gas, and water prices surged more than 23%, marking the second consecutive month that the utility fee increases have been in the 20% range. And the cost of dining out has rose nearly 7% on year. Also on Friday, the Bank of Korea held a meeting regarding consumer price growth. An official projected that inflation growth is likely to continue to slow until the middle of the year, falling to the 2% range before rising back to the 3% range towards the end of the year. 이수진, Arirang News.
Well, Korea's economy expanded in the first quarter by a small margin to ward off a recession, but pundits point out the local economy continues to face a tough uphill battle. Our Moon Hae-ryun explains.
South Korea's economy narrowly avoided going into recession as it recorded growth in the first quarter of this year. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country's gross domestic product showed growth of 0.3% on quarter between January and March, the same as the advanced estimate given at the end of April. The country showed economic growth for 9 consecutive months from 2021, but with a downturn in exports, recorded a contraction of 0.3% in the fourth quarter of last year. On year, however, the first quarter of this year only saw a 0.9% growth.
Growth on year in the 0% range is low, and we have entered a period of slow growth with the annual rate itself falling, unlike high growth rates in the past.
With the latest data, the agency attributed the turnaround to a rise in private spending on the back of eased COVID-19 restrictions. Spending on dining and accommodation, as well as recreational activities, saw 0.6% growth this quarter compared to the previous quarter. Government consumption also expanded by 0.4% on the back of increased spending on social security benefits, despite a decrease in expenditure on goods. And despite sluggish semiconductor exports, exports overall grew by 4.5% as auto exports saw significant growth, an increase of 0.7 percentage points compared to the growth recorded last quarter. However, facility investment fell by 5% due to a decline in machinery investment. Meanwhile, the country's gross national income, the total amount of money earned by people and businesses, rose by 1.9% on quarter. The Bank of Korea also released their overview for national accounts in 2022, showing that GDP increased by 2.6%, the slowest pace since the pandemic broke out in 2020. The central bank also lowered this year's economic growth outlook to 1.4%, with an extended slowdown for exports looking likely amid an ongoing global economic slump. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And despite the BOK outlook, Seoul's top finance official has shared some cautious optimism with regard to prospects on the export and foreign investment fronts. Our ministry correspondent Lee Key-cheol reports.
South Korea's finance ministry sees some positive signs in the country's exports. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho on Friday held a meeting where he mentioned factors such as increased exports to China that are contributing to the country's overall export recovery.
Exports to China, which has been one of the major factors for sluggish exports, have reached the highest level this year. Chip exports too also improved in May compared to the previous month despite a price drop.
Exports of car and secondary batteries, the minister said, are also boosting exports. Daily average exports in May surpassed $2.4 billion for the first time since last October. However, the minister also warned of remaining uncertainties such as the global economic slowdown. UAE investments were also on the table during the meeting. Chu said South Korea will continue to strengthen investment cooperation with the UAE to attract more financial investment to Seoul. Back in January, the UAE pledged to invest $30 billion in South Korea and announced 6 priority sectors to invest in, including the energy and ICT industries.
The government will initiate dialogue with top financial officials of the UAE, hold investment briefings, and expand support for these investments through the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency.
Ways to swiftly roll out some of the pledges made during the recent summits were also discussed. These include increasing flights to and from Japan to 1,000 per week by the peak of the summer season, while establishing bilateral dialogues in chips, energy, and other technologies to strengthen the supply chain. Alongside Indo-Pacific nations, joint studies on critical minerals will begin, while support for Korean companies to advance into these countries in the clean energy and nuclear power plant sectors. Also mentioning the IPEF countries' agreement on supply chain resilience, Chu said Seoul's economic supply chain risks are also expected to ease. Lee Key-cheol, Arirang News.
Over in Washington, D.C., the Senate has granted its own green light to a bipartisan bill aimed at averting a U.S. default. The approval late Thursday comes just one day after the House of Representatives passed the bill. The Fiscal Responsibility Act will now head to President Joe Biden to be signed into law. The signing is expected to take place on this Friday, 3 days before the default deadline. The bill raises the debt ceiling and restricts government spending until January 2025. Former diplomat Lee Key-cheol has been tapped to head a new agency devoted to consular affairs starting next Monday. Now, this is according to the presidential office on this Friday. He will lead the autonomous Overseas Koreans Agency, which will address the interests of Koreans residing overseas. Now, previously, this task was undertaken by a foundation under the Foreign Affairs Ministry. He has served as Korea's ambassador to the Netherlands and Consul General in Los Angeles, and was formerly, that is, the Deputy Foreign Minister for Overseas Koreans. The international community is urging for a UN Security Council meeting to address Pyongyang's purported space ambitions, which pundits believe are aimed at advancing the regime's ballistic missile technology. Our Shin Se-byuk reports.
The UN Security Council has received calls to convene an emergency meeting in light of North Korea's latest satellite launch attempt. This is according to President of the Security Council, Lana Nuseva, on Thursday, following Pyongyang's attempt on Wednesday to fire a reconnaissance satellite into orbit. The attempt failed but has prompted widespread security concerns among the international community. According to Nate Evans, the spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, the request was made jointly by the United States, France, Japan, and others. Whether or not a meeting will take place will be decided after consultation with UN member states. Meanwhile, the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are further bolstering their trilateral cooperation after Pyongyang's botched spy satellite launch attempt. During a commencement address at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado on Thursday, U.S. President Joe Biden said the allies are cooperating to strengthen deterrence against threats in the Indo-Pacific region, including North Korea. When it comes to China, Biden said Washington does not seek conflict or confrontation with Beijing. While saying the two sides should work together to solve some global challenges, Biden said the U.S. is prepared for competition and will stand up for its interests and values. And U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called North Korea dangerous and destabilizing and said the U.S. is with its two Asian allies to safeguard peace in the region against North Korean threats. This came during a joint press conference after meeting with his Japanese counterpart, Yasukazu Hamada, in Tokyo on Thursday.
We stand with our Japanese and ROK allies in the face of North Korea's continued provocations. And the United States will take all necessary measures to ensure the security of our homeland and the defense of our allies.
The Japanese defense chief also emphasized the importance of trilateral relations to better respond to North Korean threats, including any other attempt by Pyongyang to launch a satellite. 신세벽, Arirang News.
And in the meantime, South Korea, for its part, has slapped sanctions on a North Korean hacking group believed to have assisted in Pyongyang's latest rocket attempt. Our Lee Key-cheol has details.
In response to the North's failed space rocket launch to put its military reconnaissance satellite into space, South Korea on Friday imposed unilateral sanctions on a North Korean hacking group. The fresh sanctions have been imposed against the group known as Kim Soo-ki, which Seoul's foreign ministry says is a unit within the Reconnaissance General Bureau, the North's military intelligence agency. The hacking group is accused of extracting intelligence from individuals and institutions in the fields of diplomacy, security, and national defense, and handing it to the North Korean government. Kim Soo-ki is also known to engage in acquiring cutting-edge technologies related to weapons development, satellites, and space technology globally, while also directly or indirectly contributing to Pyongyang's satellite development project. Authorities say the group steals information using spear phishing, which mainly uses emails and websites. Seoul also issued a joint security advisory with Washington to warn the international community of the hacking group. It provided detailed information about the hacking techniques used by the group while recommending that precautions are taken against suspicious activities to prevent potential damage. The joint advisory was released together with South Korea's National Intelligence Service, the Korean National Police Agency, and South Korea's Foreign Ministry, along with the U.S. FBI, the U.S. State Department, and the NSA. The latest sanctions mark the world's first unilateral sanctions against Kim Soo-ki and is the 8th unilateral sanction against the North since the start of the Yoon administration in May 2022. Lee Key-cheol, Arirang News.
In Singapore, defense ministers from South Korea and neighboring Japan are scheduled to sit down on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue for the first time in years. That will also include a trilateral engagement with Washington to address Pyongyang's threat to regional security. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-seung has a preview.
This year, defense ministers from roughly 40 countries will gather at Singapore's Shangri-La Hotel to hold major defense talks. Here are some of the most anticipated discussions. With Seoul and Tokyo patching up relations lately, so are the defense lines. South Korea's defense minister and his Japanese counterpart are poised to hold talks for the first time in 4 years, marking a potential thaw in frosty diplomatic relations. The two have been held in an icy deadlock since the 2018 Japanese patrol plane incident. Tokyo accused the South Korean Navy of violating naval code by allegedly locking its radar onto the plane flying at a low altitude. South Korea denied these claims and instead condemned the Japanese patrol plane for its provocative 8-shaped flight pattern at the time. After failing to find common ground about this issue for years, the upcoming face-to-face between the Seoul-Tokyo ministers hold the potential to finally bring about a settlement on this diplomatic dispute. Another key point is dialogue on North Korea. With Pyongyang's provocations growing increasingly bolder, the regime is expected to be the ongoing talking point. In three-way talks between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, these countries may discuss ways to bolster their defenses against any potential attacks. A collaborative real-time missile alert system may likely top the agenda. As for the wider region, China will most likely be grabbing the headlines. In a rare occurrence, China's Defense Minister Li Fu turned down his American counterpart Lloyd Austin's calls for a one-on-one meeting. Tensions have escalated, especially with the two countries in gridlock over the issue of Taiwan. It remains to be seen what China's stance will be and whether it will propose a new defense strategy. Kim Hyun-seung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea's alarming activities and repulsive rhetoric topped talks at this year's Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung was there.
The Indo-Pacific has become a new center of global cooperation in addressing multiple security threats, especially with continued nuclear threats from North Korea. Speaking at the opening ceremony of Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity 2023 on Thursday, South Korean Prime Minister Han Duk-soo stressed the importance of the three-way alliance between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo for the peace and prosperity of the region.
The biggest threats to the Indo-Pacific region today are North Korea's nuclear threats and missile provocations. Through trilateral cooperation and international solidarity, we intend to strongly block North Korea's provocation and pursue the denuclearization of North Korea.
Former Secretary General of the UN Ban Ki-moon urged the international community to work together given the challenging global situation.
The global challenges before us now are unprecedented. Any individual or country, however strong or resourceful one may be, cannot solve such problems alone.
Speaking at a session on expanding global cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, South Korea's second Vice Foreign Affairs Minister Lee Do-hoon shared how South Korea plans to contribute to the Indo-Pacific. The official said one way is to strengthen non-proliferation and counter-terrorism efforts across the region, as North Korea continues to pose serious security threats.
In this regard, we condemn North Korea's so-called military reconnaissance satellite yesterday and clearly reaffirm international community's determination to denuclearize the North outweigh North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
This year's Jeju Forum was held under the theme of working together for sustainable peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, with the strategic importance of the region rapidly increasing with regard to global security and prosperity. On top of security issues, leaders and experts also called on the need to tackle common challenges like climate change, supply chain issues, and widening digital gap. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News, Jeju.
And over in Moldova, the heads of 47 European nations gathered there on Thursday to discuss tangible support for Ukraine amid Russia's ongoing invasion. At the press conference of the European Political Community Summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the host country, Moldova, for providing shelter to Ukrainians seeking refuge from Russian atrocities, and also revealed that he had secured fighter jet assistance from participants of the latest gathering. He also claimed Ukraine is prepared to join the EU and NATO. In the football field, Korea has advanced to the quarterfinals of the FIFA Under20 World Cup. In its recent round of 16 match over in Argentina, Team Korea defeated Ecuador by 3-2. The Korean players got off to a good start, scoring twice in the first 20 minutes and then warding off some late pressure from Ecuador to finally win the game. Korea faces Nigeria in the quarterfinal match on Monday. The two have met before on the field in the Under20 World Cup in 2005 when Korea won the match, and in 2013 when Nigeria won the game.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The United States and Taiwan have signed a new trade deal. The agreement announced on Thursday is the first under a framework made last year called the US-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade. This first deal is meant to streamline customs and border procedures and cover regulatory practices and small businesses. Later agreements may include agriculture and digital labor. The new deal comes against the backdrop of increasingly strained relations between Washington and Beijing. It's hoped the deal will make Taiwan more resistant to economic pressure from China and increase the island's U.S. imports. In Ukraine, at least 3 people, including an 11-year-old girl, were killed by an overnight missile attack on Thursday in the capital, Kyiv. They were reportedly killed by falling debris while struggling to enter a locked bomb shelter. Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, described the incident as a crime and said such shelters should be open at all times. An investigation has been launched. The overnight missile attack also injured 14 others and is the 4th such attack this week. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia launched 10 missiles and all were intercepted, causing the deadly debris. There were also reports of fires and damage to buildings. Turning over to Jordan, which is celebrating the marriage of its crown prince. In a royal ceremony at Zahran Palace in Amman on Thursday, Crown Prince Hussein bin Abdullah married Rajwa Al Saif. Al Saif is an architect from a prominent Saudi Arabian family. Guests to the wedding included Britain's Prince and Princess of Wales and US First Lady Jill Biden. The day was declared a national holiday and even saw a free concert being held at Amman International Stadium. The marriage is widely seen as a way to boost ties between Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And finally, in sports, Sevilla FC have won the European League for a record-extending 7th time. The Spanish football club beat Italian side Roma 4-1 on penalties after a 1-1 draw on Wednesday at Puskás Arena Stadium in Hungary. Roma's Paula Dybala drew first blood in the 35th minute. But Sevilla equalized in the second half with an own goal of Roma defender Gianluca Mancini. Sevilla have now won the UEFA Europa League, or its predecessor, the UEFA Cup, 7 times, which is 4 more times than any other club. After the match, Roma manager Jose Mourinho leveled verbal attacks at match referee Anthony Taylor in a car park while leaving the stadium. Taylor was also confronted by Roma fans at Budapest airport. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The first day of June offered summer weather in central regions, but much prettier conditions in the south. But summer heat is expected nationwide today, and some of southern provinces are having afternoon highs jumping 8 to 10 degrees higher than yesterday. After a cloudy start, skies have gotten much brighter, but some of the inland areas need to brace for 5 to 20 millimeters of passing rain, along with thunder and lightning during the day today. And those in southern parts of the country must be welcoming seeing sunnier skies after days of rain and murky conditions, with highs reaching in the upper 20s this afternoon. And we're having breathable air quality nationwide today. And finally, we have a sunny weekend with tones of summer warmth nationwide. So if you are planning outdoor activities this weekend, sun protection is a must. And also, you might want to take out all your summer clothes this weekend to get ready for the hotter season. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour. But do stay with us for our panel session coming up in a few minutes. Thank you for now.
Hello, my name is Andrew Chernesky. I'm the ambassador of the Republic of Belarus in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is a Korean national song which goes deep into centuries, helping for the future generation to understand better the rich history and culture of the Republic of Korea. Today, we have met an opportunity to understand better the Belarusian culture. And we found that there are some things which is common between Belarus and Korea culture, even in spite of remoteness of the countries. And I think, and in our very complicated world, it's very important to find provisions for making bridges between countries. And I think that studying culture and history of countries helps us to better understand each other, resonating with the word Arirang.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
춥지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's in-person appearance at the Group of Seven summit in Hiroshima last month underscored the urgency of Ukraine's plight as its people continue to persevere and prevail over Russia's ruthless military campaign. Accordingly, bilateral summit talks between Korea and Ukraine on the margins of the G7 meeting saw President Yoon promising his Ukrainian counterpart additional aid in the form of non-lethal support to address some of the more immediate hardships. So what has been the broader impact of the war on ordinary Ukrainians? How is humanitarian aid from the international community supporting Ukraine? And what are some of the priorities in post-war efforts in Ukraine? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. It's been over a year since the start of Kremlin's war against Kyiv, and Ukrainians continue to stand strong in their defense of their land. That being said, today I speak with the Ukrainian ambassador here in Korea for his thoughts on Ukraine's plight at present. Ambassador Dmytro Ponomarenko, that is. It's a pleasure, Ambassador, to have you on the show.
Pleasure is mine as well.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Ambassador Ponomarenko, let's begin then with the situation in Ukraine as it seeks to defend its territory against Russian invasion.
As you know, Russia failed to reach its strategic objectives of occupying entire Ukraine as they planned previously and destroying Ukraine's statehood and erasing Ukrainian identity. So Russia retains its maximalist goal and hopes to turn the tide in the protracted war of attrition, counting on mass mobilization, war fatigue, and nuclear blackmailing. And they have wasted hundreds of thousands of its troops as a cannon fodder on the battlefield. But the only place in which it's still trying to advance now is Bakhmut, which is a small city in eastern Ukraine in which it's used as tactics, scorched earth tactics. But the city of Bakhmut fulfilled its main task already, so to exhaust the enemy as much as possible. And during more than 10 months of fighting for Bakhmut, the Russian invaders suffered over 100,000 casualties. So Ukrainian defenders for this year liberated nearly half of the area occupied by Russian troops since the start of the full-scale military invasion, and this process will continue until the complete occupation of our sovereign territory within the internationally recognized borders. And the preparation for ongoing new counteroffensive, Ukraine's new counteroffensive is going on. So the direction and time of this counteroffensive will be determined by the military command and in due time. So as you saw from the last news, the pro-Ukrainian coalition in the world remains strong and consolidated. And during the President Zelensky visit to several European countries like Italy, Germany, Great Britain, France, which took place 2 weeks ago, significant military support was confirmed by the leading European states, United States, Great Britain, France, Netherlands, and the others agreed to work on the creation of so-called coalition of fighter jets. And on the 19th of May last week, during the G7 plus Ukraine summit, the world leaders confirmed their commitment to stand together with Ukraine's against Russia illegal and unjustifiable and unprovoked war of aggression, as well as to provide the financial, humanitarian, military, and diplomatic support to our country. And continuation of timely military and technical assistance from our partners is needed to end the war until the end of this year. We hope to end the war until the end of this year, 2023. So there can be no artificial restrictions on such assistance. So long-range missiles, modern combat aircraft, and additional heavy weaponry and air defense systems remain critical for ensuring Ukraine's successful counterattacks.
And against that backdrop, Ambassador, what can you share with us about the lives of ordinary people there as their soldiers, of course, seek to protect their land?
Yes. In revenge for its military losses on the ground, Russia continues terrorizing Ukrainian civilians, the civilian population, and the number of civilian infrastructure facilities which was damaged or destroyed by Russia has exceeded hundreds of thousands of objects. It includes like tens of thousands of residential buildings, educational and medical institutions, cultural, religion buildings, and definitely the main targets is the water and electricity networks. So these numbers do not exclude the temporarily occupied areas or territories, which is now under control of Russian forces. And the level there is much higher. And Ukraine is one of the most mined countries in the world today. So about 30% of Ukraine's territory remain dangerously dangerous because of enemy mines and unexplosive ordnance. So currently the Ukrainian government is implementing a plan for priority demining of agricultural land. And environmental damage in Ukraine caused by Russia's war is estimated it's coming to 50 billion United States dollars. So Russia continues committing war crimes and violating the humanitarian law in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. So reproducing the same pattern as it has been using in Crimea previously and parts of Donbass in 2014, such as appoints occupational administration, imposes Russian passports and legislation, and Russian occupiers introduce education in Russian and according to the Russian standards, as well as enact measures aimed at undermining and erasing Ukrainian cultural identity and actually militarizing the Ukrainian children through the installation of military kind of patriotic educational programs and military camps. So Russia as an occupying power conducts the forced conscription of Ukrainian citizens in the temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine. And the mobilization campaign in Crimea targets especially Crimean Tatars and the peoples who is not loyal towards the occupational administration. So this is a daily life on the territories which is occupied now by Russian.
Right, I see. Ambassador Ponomarenko, aside from his trips to the West, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently made a surprise in-person attendance at the G7 summit in Hiroshima, that's neighboring Japan. Could you tell us a bit more about the background behind this welcomed visit?
As you know, before coming to Hiroshima, Japan, President Zelensky visited several countries in Europe and Middle East, and the main purpose of which was to garner support for our defense and as well for the peace formula initiative proposed by the president at the G20 summit last year. So Formula's main goal is to deprive Russia of its tools to commit the crime of aggression against Ukraine and to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity and to guarantee security and justice for the entire international community. So it remains only a realistic and comprehensive plan to achieve this goal. So support for the peace formula was confirmed by the EU as well as the leadership of Italy, France, Japan, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, Germany, you name it, and many other countries. And President Zelensky's participation in the Arab League summit in Jeddah, as well as his meetings with the leaders of South Korea, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Australia during the G7 summit in Hiroshima gave a tangible, positive impetus to the implementation of the peace formula. And at the G7 summit in Hiroshima, President Zelensky proposed holding a global peace summit in July to promote the peace formula under the auspices of the United Nations. So the leaders of G7 clearly noted that the peace formula proposed by Ukraine can be only be Ukrainian. So, but we know that China, Brazil, and the number of African countries have expressed their readiness to help overcome this crisis provoked by Russia's war against Ukraine and to end this war. And as Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, which is now on his trip around the African countries, said that we are ready to discuss any peace initiative that respects two principles. First, it should not suggest territorial concessions. And second, it should not lead to a frozen conflict instead of peace. So proposals that fully comply with these principles can be discussed with a view to their implementation in the peace formula proposed by Ukrainian side.
Right. And Ambassador, against the backdrop of such efforts to ensure a peace plan for Ukraine, we, as you mentioned, President Yoon Suk-yeol and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held a meeting on the margins of the G7 gathering to address the situation in Ukraine and, of course, Korea's humanitarian support for the country. That being said, what can you tell us about the importance of such humanitarian assistance for your country?
We are sincerely grateful to our friends and allies for the security and humanitarian assistance that we receive. And we thank namely Republic of Korea and its people for their solidarity with us and for the support. And last year, Korean government provided Ukraine with 100 million in aid, which includes medicine and medical equipment, computers, ambulances, pickup trucks, protective gear, generators, mini excavators, etc. And in this regard, it should also be mentioned that we felt support not only from the government, not only from Korean government, but from the private sector, NGO, and ordinary citizens of your country. So for this year, the government of Republic of Korea announced the allocation of 130 million of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, $1 million, which is very important to us amid the urgent need for demining, as I said. that Ukraine is mostly mined territory in the world. And demining energy and medical equipment, armored ambulances, fire engines, and medicines, which is very important for us for the time being. And during the meeting in Hiroshima last week, President Zelensky and President Yoon agreed on additional non-lethal aid from the Republic of Korea to be provided to Ukraine in the near future. First of all, we are talking about modern demining machinery, in dire need of which Ukraine is right now, since, as I mentioned, almost 30% of our territory has been mined and littered with the vast amounts of explosive ordnance left by the invaders. And according to the World Bank estimations, the complete set of humanitarian demining works will cost about $40 billion, and the need for current year alone amount to 400 million. So taking into account the unprecedented scale of this problem, we look forward to the support of the international community and Korea, and President mentioned it as one of the priority during his meeting with the President Yoon. So we need, for this year, we need over 100 special mechanical demining vehicles to speed up demining time and ensure maximum safety. And we hope that Korean manufacturers like Hyundai Rotem or Hanwha will be able to quickly produce these machines and supply them to us, and possibly consider the possibility of localization of its production in Ukraine, since it's critical for us to have a Ukrainian manufacturer for this production, or a joint venture.
Right, of course. Ambassador, during their summit, Presidents Yoon and Zelensky also talked about a potential post-war rebuilding effort between the two countries. That being said, what role do you suppose Korea could play in post-war Ukraine?
The joint assessment released by the Ukrainian government and the World Bank Group and the European Commission and the other think tanks estimate that the cost of the reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine has grown to from 5 to 700 billions, so US dollars. In 2023, Ukraine will need about 15 billion for critical and priority reconstruction and recovery investments to rebuild the infrastructure critical infrastructure which was damaged by the missiles attack, and Ukraine has already started to rebuild without waiting for the war to end. And Ukraine's recovery program will be the largest reconstruction project since the World War II. And considering the high level of expertise of Korean companies in the implementation of infrastructure projects, we hope for their active participation in the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. And the government of Ukraine is ready to provide the most lucrative conditions for the reconstruction-related investment. And one of the main, pillars of Ukraine's recovery is principles of build back better. That means that to recover better than it was before. So in this context, our goal is not to only to restore facilities that have been destroyed by Russian invasion, but to build a new and modern, innovative economy with the use of best world practices in the area of development, which is Korea companies is experienced in. So we look forward to expanding our cooperation on the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine's infrastructure through loans of the Economic Development Cooperation Fund with the EDCF, with the Official Development ODA program. And we also propose to foreign countries to take patronage over the regions, cities or industries affected by the war and rebuild them. And it's already, it is a practice already. And I know that during the meeting of the First Lady with the President Yoon, she proposed for Korea to choose the Kherson region or Mykolaiv region as a region which you can contribute to the post-war recovery. And we invite Republic of Korea to join this initiative.
Right, Ambassador, and speaking about the Ukrainian First Lady, Olena Zelenska was here in Seoul, and she invited President Yoon and First Lady Kim Gon-hee to Ukraine. That being said, what do you suppose would be the broader implications of a visit by the Korean President and his wife to Ukraine?
The visit of the President of the Republic of Korea to Ukraine would become the first visit of Korean leader to Ukraine since the independence. And we think if President Yoon decided to visit Ukraine, it will be a powerful signal of support of peace in Ukraine that is currently defending the global values of democracy and freedom, and Korea as a global pivotal state, and as the President Yoon mentioned, as a compass for democracy, so should to be kind of leading this process. And we highly appreciate this visit of the President Yoon to Ukraine, and that's why the First Lady and the President invited the President Yoon to visit Ukraine on his convenience in near future. And the visit would also take the bilateral cooperation in trade, in humanitarian and cultural spheres to higher level, and enhance realization of numerous projects, of course, including the rebuilding of Ukraine.
Right, of course, the rebuilding after the war. All right, Ambassador Dmytro Ponomarenko, thank you so much for making time to speak with us today.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. And we end with our prayers to all those who have been affected by the atrocities taking place in Ukraine. Thank you for watching.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world. Like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city. transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. World Expo 2030, Busan, Korea.
얘들아, 나 좀 도와줘.
왜 무슨 일이야?
아니, 우리 에비뉴들의 매력에 빠져서 헤어나오지 못하겠어. 그래서 하루 종일 아무것도 못하고 있다고.
아, 이거 에비뉴한테 한 번 빠지면 쉽게 못 빠져나온다던데. 아, 어떡하죠? 무슨 방법이 없을까요?
아, 역시 또 제가 이렇게 나서야 될 시간이 왔네요. 일단 에비뉴의 매력에서 빠져나올 수 있는 방법은
뭘까요?
없어요. 없습니다. 하지만 반대로 에비뉴가 저희에게 푹 빠지게 하는 방법은 있죠.
오, 뭐예요? 궁금해서 알려주세요.
답을 줘.
이번 앨범의 타이틀곡 루저 무대로 에비뉴들의 마음을 사로잡으면 됩니다. 그럼 일단 테스트를 빨리 해볼까요?
오케이. 난 길을 잃은 루저.
아, 근데 이거 진짜 효과가 있는 것 같은데 우리 에비뉴들한테 빨리 보여줘야겠어. 어떻게 다들 AB6 무대 보러 갈 준비 되셨나요?
Yes. Then this week simply contour.
Don't miss out.
바이바이.
안녕.